Hello everyone, I'm Ben Johnson and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with chess players, personalities, authors, and adult improvers about their lives, their careers, and about chess improvement. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have a young up-and-comer in the chess world joining us this week. I'm pretty friendly with him from our time in Pittsburgh. He is 22 years old. He is about 2100 USCF. He is fresh out of college and has recently been hired as Chess.com's lead solution architect. I look forward to finding out what that is in a minute. He also works on the Pro Chess League for Chess.com, the Fischer Random World Championship. We'll get into all that stuff. He also founded a popular chess site called Chess Summit, which you may have heard referenced in previous episodes of Perpetual Chess. He makes videos for chessopeningsexplained.com. And now here he is joining us, Isaac Steincamp. How are you, Isaac?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me here.
My pleasure. So freshly minted Chess.com employee. Congratulations, Isaac.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy ride to get to this point, but I'm really glad that I'm here. I'm really enthusiastic to be working with the members who are on my team, and really excited to see what we have to go forward with this year.
Wow, you've already got the corporate speak down and everything. So Isaac and I go back a little bit.
Sure.
We lived in Pittsburgh at the same time, and Isaac helped me with one of my chess clubs, and of course we would see each other around in chess circles. Aside from that. And I remember when you told me you were going to do your first streaming for chess.com, and it feels like a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago, was it, Isaac?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I think that was mid-2018, maybe a little bit later, but it's definitely felt like it's been a really long time. Admittedly, I've never tried to go for partner status on Twitch. It's always just been something that, when I was in college, I wanted to do it once a week to kind of keep connected with all of my followers from Chess Summit. And now that, I'm moved to Washington, D.C., I've kind of used it as a way to kind of fine-tune my overall streaming skills and my production skills, and that way I can elevate those for my job at chess.com.
Yes, which begs the question. So what does a lead solution architect do?
So currently I'm working as the lead solutions architect for chess.com, which means I basically look through all of the stats and study our events and compare them to successful models of past either chess events or esports events to basically decide what are the next steps that chess.com needs to take to make sure that those events are running smoothly and that they're going to meet the level of production that we would expect for an event of that caliber, and what kind of events we should continue to pursue in the future.
Wow. So, I mean, it sounds like interesting work, but so you've been doing some work for them. I think it seems like, observing from a distance, sort of in a slowly but steadily increasing capacity. So did you apply specifically for this position, or was it more like they liked you and decided to hire you and tried to find an appropriate role for you, sort of thing?
So I got kind of lucky that we had a mutual match. Back in December, I kind of had this moment where I didn't know what I wanted to do, which I guess is typical for most college students who are seniors and about to graduate. I had a bunch of internships in the past that, I thought that, were really good working experiences for me, and I gained a lot of skills, but I just didn't feel like it was a good fit for me professionally. And I always knew that, working in chess, right, was always something that I wanted to explore, but never really had the opportunity to do. And I felt that if I didn't take the next step to at least talk to people at chess.com to see if I would be a good fit, I'd be kicking myself in 5 years, if I just never took that shot. So I talked to a couple of my friends at chess.com. I actually wound up talking with Danny Wrench at that point, a couple of days later. And, we agreed that, back in January or so, I would start working, on a couple of projects to just kind of see what the workflow was like at chess.com and see if it was a good match. And I've been working for them ever since. Great.
And at what point did you know that this would be a full-time gig?
So, I mean, obviously when I started, I didn't think that, I was going to be seriously considered for a position at chess.com. Admittedly, when I was in high school, I thought that all of the guys at chess.com got in a room and laughed at Sam Copeland because he was the weakest chess player. And so if he's 2,200 and I'm like 2,000, 2,100, I guess I'm not a good fit, right? And so I kind of just erased this from my radar for most of my college years. But in reality, it's not true. Chess.com has a lot of employees of a lot of different rating sets. And so, talking to the people who, work at chess.com and working with people like Danny and Nick Barton and Sam Copeland and Aaron Graham, I really got a good feel for what it was like to work at chess.com. And at first I told myself, like, this is the opportunity that you want. This is, go for it and, go from there. And it was a really compelling argument that this was the website that basically kind of helped me restructure my passion for chess back in high school. And now the guy who basically his name is associated with that website is calling me on my cell phone saying, hey, we want you to be a part of our team. And, I made sure I took the time that both emotionally and professionally, this was the best decision for me. And, I'm really glad that I'm here today.
So now that you're getting settled in at chess.com, Isaac, what are you discovering your day-to-day workflow is like?
So a lot of my workflow is based around studying what happens in the existing market, both within the chess industry and outside of the chess industry, specifically esports, and modeling the kind of decisions that we make with our own events to what happens with other successful chess events, but also successful esports events, in a way that we can continue building the best events there are on the internet for online chess. So a lot of the time that I spend working, I'm looking at what does Overwatch do to make their league successful. I look at the grassroots movements for different esports leagues, and I look to see what are we doing at chess.com that's different from them, and how is it that chess being a unique game in and of itself how does that give us advantages that maybe these other esports don't, and how do we leverage that and to create a better product?
So basically you're sitting around watching Twitch of video games?
I mean, that's a little bit unfair. I mean, I do a lot of work, in spreadsheets and working with stats and, evaluating to see, where do the numbers match up and, what are our overall retention rates and, what are the next steps to make make this event that we had that was great. How do we make it excellent? How do we make it, the event that everyone wants to circle on their calendar and come back and watch next year?
Gotcha. No, I was mainly kidding, of course. But so you were a political science and math major, is that right, at University of Pittsburgh?
So I finished last month with a major in economics and a minor in political science.
Sorry. Okay.
I think when I was working with you, I was working towards my major in math, but around that time, I actually decided to make the switch over to economics. And so I actually spent a lot of my collegiate career thinking that I was going to actually go work for a political party or go work for government and, try to create, change and bureaucracy. And I quickly found that, as inspired as I was to go try to do that work, maybe the amount of, dynamic workflow that I was expecting just wasn't there in bureaucracy, which I guess I should have realized from the start. And so that got me looking at what else I was interested in and, pointed me in the direction of chess.com.
Yeah, chess politics are bad enough without even going into actual regular politics. So
right.
I think it's a wise decision, and it's good that you learned it young. So are you like so you mentioned you're looking at statistics. Do you have like have you learned some programs, like some of the popular statistics programs to help you with this work?
So, I learned a lot from my econometrics class I took at the University of Pittsburgh and, taking, for example, a program like Stata and then, taking a look at the numbers and trying to figure out like what are our projections, where do we, move forward and what's our next step. But I mean, honestly, a lot of this, as much of it as it is numbers based, the other part of it is actually like community development. Esports is still a relatively new industry compared to, some of the other more traditional sports, industries. And so part of what I do is also take the lessons from what other esports have done, as well as, what have other chess organizers have done that have been successful, and how do we move towards that? And obviously there's only so much data there. And so it's, that's where the complexity of my day-to-day job, lies.
Okay. Now I know you're just getting your feet wet, and I don't know to what extent any insights that you generate would be proprietary, to chess.com. But can you think of any early examples of practices that you would like to mimic, that you would like to bring to chess.com, whether it be from another chess production or from an esport?
So one thing that we've already started to do that's actually in action right now is the work that we're doing towards the Pro Chess League qualifiers. One of the things that I realized that maybe the Pro Chess League wasn't as successful doing compared to other esports leagues was there wasn't really an effective grassroots movement, meaning that players in like that, 1,000 to 1,700 range, which constitutes most of like our viewership on, any given online chess event, they didn't feel connected to these Pro Chess League teams because even though, realistically, they might be able to train and become a board for. There was a detachment. And so one thing that we've already started to do for the Pro Chess League qualifiers and for the Pro Chess League regular season in 2020 is starting to push teams in the right direction of, what does it take to build a grassroots movement? What kind of social media presence does each individual team need to have? So in that way we can create a better Pro Chess League and a better viewing experience for all of our viewers who enjoy the Pro Chess League. And so honestly, a lot of that's been applying what I learned from managing the Pittsburgh Pawnsgrabbers and taking what worked and didn't work to a much broader, simpler scale. But then the other part of that obviously is also taking a look at what are the actual stats from the Pro Chess League season and what works versus my assumptions that I had when I was working for the Pawnsgrabbers.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be fun to see all that data, but I remember that you worked hard on the Pawnsgrabbers in all respects, but especially with the social media stuff. So what did you learn from that experience?
So I think the number one thing that I learned from working for the Pittsburgh Pawnsgrabbers, and I think this was a very helpful skill for me, not just for my specific job that I have now, but just as a professional skill. It's very easy to feel that you need to be very detail oriented on everything when you are the face of the product, or when you are you're running all of the behind the scenes part of like the team or the project. It's very easy to feel like everything needs to be perfect. In reality, if you spend that much time on everything, you have time for nothing else, right? And with the Pittsburgh Pawnsgrabbers, I found that there were certain aspects of what we were doing that I think were really beneficial for the team. And then there were some areas that we added on in 2019 that I think were detractors from the overall team product that we would have liked to have had. And so what I've been doing is with these teams and training them how to become a more successful Pro Chess League team is basically minimizing the mistakes that I made and getting them to focus specifically on the areas that we know that worked. And I have that unique experience both from being a manager in the Pro Chess League, but also working for chess.com.
So what worked?
Well, obviously, social media is the most visible thing, and anybody who watches the Pro Chess League knows that for the past 2 years, Pittsburgh Pawnsgrabbers have had a pretty strong game on Twitter. But things that haven't worked as much, Discord, for example, that's kind of taken a backseat. Whereas in 2019, a lot of Pro Chess League teams thought that was something that needed a lot of attention. When in reality, that time was better spent creating tournaments for the Pro Chess League teams, fans, and getting them motivated about playing. And the other thing, of course, is streaming and, spending as much time as you can on a team channel, helping create that team brand. That's really important in terms of grassroots development. That probably should have happened last year, specific to Pittsburgh, but for many other teams as well.
Gotcha. And what else? What other changes are in the pipeline for the Pro Chess League? What else have you been working on in that regard?
So obviously the most important thing for the Pro Chess League is to make sure that on top of having a strong grassroots movement, that the league continues to be competitive and, that all of the players are, wanting to show up every week and, play their best chess. And so, already this year with the qualifiers, Greg and I have been working together to build basically a tournament that lasts 4 weeks where the top teams will move through. Whereas in the past, a team could have a really good, Sunday or Saturday and find their way into the Pro Chess League when maybe the best team, just had an off day. With the Pro Chess League's qualifiers already lasting 4 weeks, it guarantees that the teams that are going through in the qualifiers are likely already going to be playoff contenders going into 2020. And I would go so far to say that there is no team in the current Pro Chess League that's going to repeat next year that is safe from relegation.
And the qualifiers are coming up, right? Oh, and by the way, I should clarify, I think most people know, but when you say Greg, you're referring to Commissioner, and I am Greg Shahade, who of course has been on the show talking about Pro Chess League, and I'm sure will be again someday. But you have the but to get back to my question, you have the qualifiers coming up, right?
Right. So the first qualifier starts on September 26th, and we have a couple dates selected after that in October. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I believe they're going to be on Saturdays mostly, and that's going to mean that teams are going to send their best players. So even if not all of the teams will make it to the Pro Chess League, it's going to feel like a Pro Chess League event in a way that it's never had before.
Okay. And is it public knowledge yet who's trying to qualify?
So unlike last year where we released all of the teams basically the week before the start of the qualifiers, we've kind of released qualifier teams as the Pro Chess League Summer Series, which is currently ongoing, has progressed, with the promise to continue releasing teams as they've met the criteria that they need to get in to the Pro Chess League qualifiers. So currently the confirmed teams that will be competing in the upcoming qualifiers are the Reykjavik Puffins, Barcelona Raptors, Pittsburgh Pawnsgrabbers, and the Sao Paulo Capybaras. But there are many more teams that are, currently still trying to pass off through every single one of the, the minimum requirements to get into the to the Pro Chess League qualifiers.
It's great that you have so many teams lining up to get in, and some already with, like Reykjavik in particular, with their famous Puffins clip. They already have a rich sort of history in the Pro Chess League.
Right, and they actually got to play in the Pro Chess League Summer Series, that's currently, as I mentioned, ongoing, and they got to play a couple of weeks ago, and they actually earned their first ever Pro Chess League playoff spot in the Summer Series. They wound up losing to the Minnesota Blizzard, but it just goes to show how these teams are working really hard already to continue improving, get ready for the Pro Chess League season, and go from there.
Yeah, and Isaac, I have to cop to the fact that I haven't been following the Summer Series all that closely. So for me and for anyone else who maybe doesn't know how it fits in with the overall framework of the Pro Chess League, could you explain it a little bit?
So the Pro Chess League Summer Series is a continuation of the 2019 Pro Chess Leagues, where fans actually get an opportunity to play in the Pro Chess League and change the outcomes of how their teams do throughout the season. And so we've seen a lot of traditional teams that have usually done well in the Pro Chess League, like Baden-Baden, for example, and even St. Louis to an extent in the group stage, struggle to try to move on to the next stage of the tournament because, fans are really passionate about the teams that they support. Teams that did really well, Minnesota, Montreal, they moved on to the playoffs. And so now that we're into the playoffs, it's, going back to the traditional 4 versus 4 format. We've got championship weekend, which this will be released obviously after championship weekend is finished on August 30th and August 31st. But there's already a lot of teams that are sending, quite a lot of strong players, and it's going to be a really exciting weekend for everyone.
Okay, and what happens for the winners?
So for the winners, this will be like a separate Pro Chess League title. This will be like the Pro Chess League Summer Series title. And so currently St. Louis is trying to become the first ever Pro Chess League double champion. But obviously with this being such a big event and with Twitch helping, provide, a pretty substantial prize fund, this is actually a really great springboard for these teams that have worked really hard during the 2019 Pro Chess League season to begin funding their teams for the 2020 season. And so teams that do well and get to the playoffs and, maybe they don't win the whole thing, but they get to the semifinals, that might buy them a free agent for the duration of the season. And, even if you aren't following the Summer Series, everyone knows that a free agent in the Pro Chess League can make or break your season. So this is this is the opportunity that teams are, really looking forward to be able to become, a next level program in 2020.
Oh, so yeah, and it's an additional opportunity for funding. I know that. I assume this isn't secret information, but I know that fundraising for teams can have some challenges. I know that you encountered some when you were managing the Pawnsgrabbers. So is that something that is going to sort of fall under your umbrella to work on fundraising generally for individual teams? And do you guys have like new initiatives in mind for that?
So one of the things that we're doing behind the scenes is we're making stats more accessible for teams that are, actually trying to reach out to local sponsors, which is, for those programs, that's their best opportunity to get sponsored is at the local level. And so, we have talked to Pro Chess League teams that are interested in getting their own sponsors, and we provide them, with the stats and figures that they need in a way that we've never done before. And so I already know, like, for example, the San Diego Surfers already have a sponsor for the 2020 season. They haven't even made it through the qualifiers yet. And I know that there's some other teams in the qualifiers as well that are already taking that next step and finding local sponsors. And so making information accessible and, making sure that the level of communication is, pretty consistent throughout the off season has given these managers an opportunity to make their teams more powerful with the support of local sponsors.
So what would be an example of some stats that you would provide?
Well, obviously, the number one things that local sponsors are always looking for, they're going to be number of impressions, both on social media and on Twitch, the kinds of placements that, the company logo, for example, would get on stream. Is it going to be visible? How many fans are going to see it? What's the click-through rate? These are the kinds of things that are really boring to look at on spreadsheets, but are going to get the people in the room who are, considering on making that investment really excited.
And do you have demographics on like where the actual people watching are? Because, obviously there's going to be a pretty strong correlation between, say, people around Pittsburgh watching the Pawnsgrabbers and stuff like that. But, the chess world is strong enough, and when you have outsized sort of chess personalities, like say John Bartholomew for Minnesota, or the Chessbrahs for Montreal, they're not just going to be pulling from their local markets. So how does that work in terms of trying to find sponsors? Are they going local or more national, or just sort of it varies on a case-by-case basis?
I mean, it definitely varies on a case-by-case basis. There are teams in the Pro Chess League that are strong and don't need funding because either they already have it internally or their players have agreed to basically play for free. But we do provide support in the sense of providing all the literature that they need, educating them on the numbers that they need to know. At the end of the day, it makes for a smarter Pro Chess League. And, we do have the regional data that the managers need to be able to take that next step. But the one big thing that, the big message that we sent to all the teams this year, specifically starting with the qualifiers, is that with the level of accountability increasing, it's going to make for a better league and a better product.
Cool. Well, I look forward to it. It sounds like fun work, to be honest. I mean, it sounds like it wouldn't be that repetitive, and you have your hands in enough things that it wouldn't, a lot of room for research and affecting change.
Definitely. And one of the things I love about my job right now is every day I get offered a new challenge, and it might be completely different than what I considered the previous day, but that gives me an opportunity both to grow but also to work with people from around the world.
Yeah. Okay. And Isaac, last Pro Chess League question. This one's the important one. Is Greg Shahade technically your boss?
I mean, I don't. I think the way that we see our working relationship is that, we try to bounce ideas off of each other. And I think we would both agree that we think very differently in terms of what the Pro Chess League needs to grow. But when we come together and we find an idea that we both like, it's 100% always going to be a great idea. And so we've already identified some rules, which I'm not allowed to release yet, that are going to improve the Pro Chess League season for the 2020 season and for the qualifiers, that I don't think would have been possible had we had both not basically gone back and forth and debated, certain aspects of the Pro Chess League.
Okay. But he's not making you go get him donuts or anything?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, good. No, I mean, and what would be an example of, can you share anything where you guys disagree? I mean, Greg, obviously, he's been on the show a few times, quite outspoken about his general sort of chess promotion philosophy. Does yours broadly fall in line, and are your disagreements more granular? Or do you disagree on like stuff like trying to limit draws and making things as Greg is, I would say, very sort of anti-traditional in terms of his approach to promoting chess. Do you share that philosophy?
I think him and I are a little bit different in that vein. And I think the one thing that's important is that we both love the Pro Chess League and we both want to see it continue to succeed going into 2020 and beyond. He's more of a micro guy. Rather, he's more of a macro guy. He thinks big picture. He thinks, what do the players want? What do the fans want? And I'm more micro. I focus on, well, if we implement this change, well, this is what that would mean if we were to apply it back on the 2018, 2019 season. The great thing about now having run this league for 3 years is that Greg has kind of created the path work that we can work from. We now have data that we can go back and apply, changes to before we actually implement them in the 2020 season. I can't really give specific examples of where we've disagreed because they've ultimately led to, honestly, amazing rules that we want to release at a later date. But, we have hotly debated certain aspects of the Pro Chess League, and I think it's made, the Pro Chess League a better product already in the off season. Okay,
maybe next time I get Greg on, once when the next season is about to launch and the changes have been announced, maybe he can take us back a little bit. We'll see.
Right.
So one more topic on chess.com, Isaac. The Fischer Random World Championship is ongoing. So what's your role in that?
So I worked mostly on the non-titled qualifiers phase of that event. Of course, in doing so, it made me learn all of the different phases of how the Fischer Random World Championship works, basically. For maybe your listeners who aren't familiar with the event or not sure what Fischer Random is. Fischer Random, of course, is the variant of chess where all of the pieces of the back rank are shuffled. And this event is the first attempt to do a serious world championship where anybody in the world can actually participate in this event, regardless if you're titled, if you're not titled, if you're an elite grandmaster. It's accessible to everyone. It's the first time that that's ever been attempted, using an online platform for a world championship. And so the tournament started with a non-titled phase, then it moved on to a titled phase. We're currently in the knockouts where players like Sergei Karyakin, Wesley So, Alexander Grishuk, they're all trying to get one of the 8 spots to be able to progress into the quarterfinals and then into the live semifinals and finals in Norway later this year.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Fischer Random, as I've talked about before, and as I was telling you before we recorded, yesterday was the first time I got to watch any coverage, and I just caught a little bit of this Fiddler and Grishuk playoff, and it's so much fun to see to me, I'm sure there's some people grumbling listening, but to me, to see all these fresh positions and see how these amazing chess players handle them.
Absolutely. It's really refreshing. I actually had the opportunity to do commentary on the Chess Channel for one of the non-titled qualifiers. I believe it was like a 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern time shift. So it was a little bit on the late side. But, one of the things I just loved doing commentary, with that event was just how original, the ideas have to be if you want to win. And, coming up with these ideas and knowing where to put your pieces, and you only have 10 minutes to do all of it, always makes for really compelling games. So we're already seeing in the knockout of significantly lower draw rate. I believe, if I'm having the stat correct, with the knockout qualifier where Santosh Gujarati beat Sergei Karyakin, I believe there were only 4 draws in 40 games in that entire bracket, which, says that there's still hope for chess, right?
Yeah, it's quite promising. I mean, they are faster games, but still, any time you're having a percentage even in that ballpark, that's quite good, especially in light of, as we record this, I mean, the Sinkfield Cup will be over by the time people hear this, but the narrative I don't think is going to change, that there have been a whole lot of draws in this tournament.
Right. I mean, this has definitely been, of all of the major tournaments that I can think of, the one where there's just been an incredible number of draws. I think there's the London Chess Classic from a few years ago that comes to mind, but I think all of us are collectively happy to put this one to bed and move on to the World Cup in just a couple of weeks, which is, I think, for most people, the most exciting event on the chess calendar every 2 years. And so I'm going to be personally looking forward to that, and I think a lot of people are too.
Yeah, a couple back in the day, you did a Chess Summit pool. Are you still going to be able to do that, or are you now, is that beyond your time constraints or what's permitted under your work at chess.com?
So, my working relationship with Chess Summit is always, obviously amicable, and, I work with all of the guest authors on that, but ultimately we're going through a restructuring process where I will no longer be the director of Chess Summit, just because what my job demands at chess.com means that I can't spend time focusing on how to improve the quality of content or the website and its overall profile. And so that will ultimately, be transferred. And, there's a couple of guest authors that we're currently considering right now to take that next step. So I believe that this year there will not be a knockout kind of bracket predictor challenge on Chess Summit. But yeah, that was definitely one of the things that started my passion for the World Cup. I remember the first time we did it, I believe, was back in 2015, and then we did it again in 2017 in cooperation with Chessable, and it's just a great event, and I love watching it.
Yeah, I do too, and I think that someone out there, I mean, what you guys did was a step at Chess Summit, I should say, was a step in the right direction in terms of having like a pool, but the World Cup of chess in particular is something where there needs to be like a March Madness type pool where people put up actual money, and some chess person needs to step up and make that happen. It doesn't need to be a lot of money, I don't think that's the most important thing, but I just think it makes it so much more fun. So September 9th to October 4th in Khantey-Minsk, Russia. And for any listeners who don't know, this is it's one of the rare elimination style chess tournaments. And there end up being lots of playoffs because if I recall correctly, the format is 2 classical games, and from there it goes to faster and faster time controls. So the tension just mounts. I mean, it's sometimes in these round robins, at best, the tension flatlines. If you have like a tie going to the last round, but the top players aren't playing each other, sort of thing. At worst, you can have sort of an anticlimactic ending. Obviously, every once in a while, you have like the dream scenario where like the 2 top players are playing in the last round. But basically, you're guaranteed drama in the knockout, and it's a large enough field where where some lesser known players really get a chance to make a name for themselves and surprise some people. So yeah, I'm excited for it. And if anyone listening to this wants to run a pool, I'm happy to help promote it. Anyway, with that aside over, so Fischer Random, we've got, so Svidler moved on as we record. It's yesterday. Again, there might have been one or two more qualifications by the time this comes out, which will be 8 days from now, Isaac. But I saw Firouzja has already advanced. You mentioned Vidit Gujrati. Who else do we know will be making an appearance in the later rounds?
I believe we're still in the early stages of the overall knockout qualifiers. As I mentioned, I oversaw the non-titled qualifiers, so I know that there's more knockout qualifiers later in the week, but I know that Wesley So is playing on August 1st, and I know that there are other bigger players playing after that, and obviously in the semifinals, they'll be met with players like Magnus Carlsen and so forth. So we're definitely in that early stages still, but there's a lot of really strong players in all of the brackets, leading up to the quarterfinals that will obviously, be both intriguing and have a lot of drama. I think that, that's what the fans really want to see.
Cool. Yeah. And hopefully if this goes well, this will be something that will be a regular event because as we've mentioned, I found it at the beginning, it can be hard to sort of wrap one's head around, but I mean, as it gets to a more condensed field, it's going to be super fun, I think. Okay. You ready for some chess improvement, Isaac?
Let's do it.
Okay. So Isaac, I mean, you've got the pure love for chess and you've been working hard on your game for a few years. So what's the current state of it?
So I'm currently 2000 to 2100 rated USCF. I don't really pay attention to FIDE, but I believe it's in the same kind of rating area. My goal has always been to break National Master, which I haven't gotten to quite yet, but I'm hopeful because I've now moved from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C., that I'll get, different opponents, different atmosphere, and, hopefully a different swing in results. But, when it's come to me working on chess for the past couple of years, it's been Pawnsgrabbers and Chess Summit and Chess.com and Chess Openings Explained and all these other projects first, and then me second. And now I'm kind of excited to move to this next phase of my life where I can guarantee that I have a set amount of time to actually work on my own chess and try to improve from there. Yeah,
it's funny because all those things were kind of like your side hustles, but you've managed to sort of roll them up into your main hustle so that now the actual playing chess can be your side hustle.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny how all of that turned out. I mean, I don't think I would have thought that, with how chaotic things were when I was, a senior or even a junior in college, that, getting a job would make things easier in terms of having that time and flexibility to play chess. But it has, and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that you feel like you've plateaued a little bit, but I mean, generally, I was looking at your rating graph. Not something I do that regularly, but in preparation for this interview, and yeah, I mean, it seems like you're on a good trajectory. I mean, you're only 22, and I do feel like when you get out of college, I mean, there's two periods in life. Thinking back when I was struck by how much free time I had. One was when I got to college, but you obviously, you found a way to fill those hours very quickly. But the other is when you get out of college and you get a real job, especially with on the one hand, I guess the fact that you're living with your girlfriend, like that in one sense could give you more free time, in another sense less, depending on how you look at it. But in any event, your time is going to be pretty well budgeted for. Like you'll have chess hours if you want them. So how do you think you'll approach them? What will be your first order of business in terms of sharpening up your game?
So right now I've already started kind of like preparing, and I'm looking at potentially playing in a couple rated games in early September. And so my focus has mainly just been to work on tactics and ignore openings completely, which has been really refreshing. And I know that there's a lot of titled players out there who've been saying that for years, but
yep.
When you're stuck in Pittsburgh and you're playing the same 10 to 12 people over and over and again to try to get like 3 to 4 rating points, you have to book up on your openings. And if you take a couple months off, or if you take even a couple weeks off, the youngsters in Pittsburgh are going to beat you and take your rating points and go do bigger and better things without you. And so I'm really happy to be moving to that phase where now that I'm kind of going to be playing people who I either haven't played in years or I've never played before, I can focus on the things that will actually make me a stronger player, like tactics, and continue to work on my end game and my middle game and like my overall, positional sense of things. That's obviously, those are going to be the things that will help me jump over 2200 versus not.
Okay. Yeah. And in a similar vein, Peter Newhall asked what you felt is holding you back. He's, been aware of you, obviously, and thanks for the support and for the question, Peter. So, I mean, basically, he's wondering do we infer from what you're saying that you feel that tactics have what have been holding you back from making another push higher?
I mean, I wouldn't put it entirely on my tactical sense. I mean, calculation has always been one of the weaker aspects of my chess because I've always loved like this positional Karpovian style of chess. Just, have a set opening that you want to play and play the same plan every game and wear down everybody and go to an end game. So because of that, my calculation has suffered. But I mean, part of it, so I've also just been kind of unlucky, demographically playing in Pittsburgh. If you want to go play in a tournament that's not in Pittsburgh, you're either going to Ohio or you're going to Philadelphia. And if you're a college student without a car, you're playing in Pittsburgh. And the other thing that's always been kind of unfortunate for me is being a student and having all of these deadlines, both for my own personal projects and for school, that dictates my schedule. And so there were a couple of times in college where I'd either come back from Europe and I'd be playing phenomenal chess, or, even the last serious tournament that I played and I actually won first place, where I just haven't been able to build off of that momentum because I had to put everything else aside to focus on something else. And this will be the first time in 4 years where I haven't had to do that. And, I think that and, the ability to actually work on the things that are most important to my chess, that could get me over the hurdle. But, honestly, I'm just excited about playing quality chess again and, playing new opponents. And if I get the title in the next couple months, great. And if I have to wait a couple more years even, that's also fine. I'm just happy to be playing, somewhat seriously again.
It sounds like you have such an emphasis on the title, but you don't strike me as someone who would, I mean, do you think if you reach you're referring, of course, to the USCF Master title, which requires a rating of 2200. Do you think you would just hang it up then? I feel like you wouldn't even miss a beat. You'd be like on to the next challenge.
I mean, it really depends, right? I mean, your life circumstances are always going to change, what it takes. And, I've spent so much of my chess career focused on, trying to get the national master title that I haven't really thought beyond that. And in a sense, that takes a little bit of pressure off of me and I can kind of relax and try out new things over the board. So, if I do get the national master title, obviously then the question becomes what next? But, I've just been focused on that for so long. That's obviously been my goal for starting Chess Summit. And so I guess the correct answer is I'm going to start there. And, if I get the master title, then I'll figure out what's next.
Okay. Yeah. So one step at a time. But I mean, needing 100 points, I mean, I don't know a ton about your game, but I feel like your rating it's been closer to 2200. So it might be a matter of, I mean, I feel like it will probably take some time, if only like, just because you need a lot of points, even if your strength is not necessarily that far off when everything's clicking. So we'll see. And I know that in the past you've worked with Grandmaster Eugene Perelyshteyn. Shout out to Eugene. Is that still ongoing?
Yeah, so I meet with Grandmaster Eugene Perelyshteyn on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on what my upcoming tournament schedule is. And even through all these periods where I haven't been able to play tournament chess, we've used this as an opportunity to kind of pinpoint specific areas that I need to be working on that I can do in my spare time and not have to worry about keeping up to date, like theory, for example. So, that's been really helpful for me. It's always nice to know that like I'm working hardcore on these chess related projects, but then I get to, sit down for an hour, a week with a really strong player and actually think about what are my issues in my current positions, not somebody else's, issues in their position. And so, that's definitely been helpful. And I'm looking forward to applying what I've learned in, upcoming tournaments.
Cool. And what sort of things has Eugene highlighted?
So one of the things that we started to realize was when I was playing all of these youngsters in Pittsburgh, I'd be so focused on the prep that my overall sense of what's going on in the position and what the correct evaluation is and, is this a practical decision? They were all kind of being thrown off and it was making me uncomfortable. And so what we did is we took a step back and we went methodically through everything. It's like, okay, like, how is your calculation in these kind of positions? Is your method of going through the position correct? Okay, so that seems fine. Okay, so now in this position, are you evaluating these positions correctly? Are you being practical? Are you understanding that, if you go into this endgame, you're still going to be better, or are you going to try to go for this flashy tactic that may or may not work? And so a lot of it's been psychological, and then the other half of it obviously has been strategic and, again, calculation based.
Yeah, I have to admit, I had the same, a similar thought following on what you're saying. Because even when you mentioned, I mean, and obviously I have a little bit of insight because I played a bit of chess when I lived in Pittsburgh, although not super actively, but enough to realize what you're saying about how small the player pool is. When you mentioned how you feel like you have to be prepared, sort of to an artificial level because it's such a small pool of players, but I would push back against that a little bit. I mean, especially with white, I feel like you can just play anything, and even with black, I feel like with a modicum of work, you can find ways to get out of the opening. And I mean, I look at I can even put forth an example from Pittsburgh. Former or possibly current, I'm not sure, Pawnsgrabbers member Gabe Petesch, who we're both friendly with, rated about 2,400 USCF. I mean, Gabe would be the first to tell you that he barely, he knows a little bit about a lot of openings, but he doesn't know a lot basically about any of them. And he just wings it every game. And meanwhile, he just cleans up. I mean, obviously he's a super strong player, but that's sort of what I'm getting at is it always, to me, so often, even around our level, comes back to just improving one's overall chess play and not overemphasizing, not getting stuck in sort of what you call sort of the mental block of obsessing about how the opening's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, Gabe is obviously the counter example, right? But I mean, the one thing I will say about Gabe is, these rapid tournaments that Pittsburgh is known to have a lot of, he's very good at managing his time, as his rating level would suggest, and so. If I could calculate his 2,400 rating level, then openings wouldn't be a problem for me. But in the meantime, when I was, my senior year in Pittsburgh, there were 3 students of Alexander Shabalov who were booked to the gills, who were exactly my rating, right? And so it was, my job, I felt, to prove that I could either hold with black or prove an advantage with white in those games, and they were challenging. But when you focus a lot of time on opening prep, it forces you to spend less time on other things.
Yeah, I'm still suspicious, Isaac, I have to say, but I still feel like it wasn't the opening that often, in the games. But in any event, I mean, we'll get some more data, getting back to what you're saying from chess.com, because DC, especially DC being upwardly mobile, employed, able to navigate the Eastern Seaboard, along with having a much wider array of players to play against to begin with. Not to mention just the fact that it's a fresh group of players to play against. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I certainly don't think you're going to have a lot of trouble gaining some rating points, given your new life situation. But yeah, I still worry about you focusing too much on openings. Okay, so what have been some of your favorite chess resources that you've come across while you've been studying, Isaac?
So there have been exactly 3 things that I think I can attribute to me growing the most since I've broken 2000. Number 1, honestly, it's just going to ChessBase, setting a position where basically it searches for any position without queens on the board, and then searching for within that subset games that Magnus Carlsen has won, and just studying those endgames. And on Chess Summit, I actually wrote a whole series about this called Endgame Essentials, which you guys can find on chesssummit.com, chesssummit.com. But what that really helped me do was it kind of helped me plan out, the endgame and try to really understand what is it that makes these GMs so great at endgame and what is it that I can learn from that. I would say that on its own immediately got me about 50 points on my rating, just because I wasn't afraid to go into endgames anymore. And even if I knew the position was probably practically drawn, I was confident enough that I could just ground out my opponent. I could find these weaknesses and be able to play on and, convert. And that's really important, I think, for anybody who's under 2,100 to just have that, confidence in these kind of positions where there's fewer pieces, where a lot of young players, for example, aren't. And so that was a huge benefit for me. The other thing that I think really helped was, when I started preparing for the U.S. Junior Open, my coach, Grandmaster Eugene Perelyshteyn, recommended that I read the book 100 Chessmaster Trade Secrets by Andrew Soltis, and that really helped me identify what different plans are, from a dynamic perspective. It helped me kind of see that, if I, put my knight on e5 in a certain pawn structure, that's going to help me create, various kinds of pressure. Or maybe I should be using my A or my H pawns a little bit more frequently to be able to, create counterplay on either the king side or the queen side of the board. And so that book really helped me kind of pull everything together and kind of understand what my position should be doing on like a move by move basis. And then the last resource that I think has really helped me has been the Chess Structures Grandmaster Guide by Mauricio Flores Rios.
Yeah, that book's amazing.
And I know that everyone recommends that book, and well, we all do for a reason, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It tells you all of the plans that you need to know in any given position. It opens your mind up to consider all of these different ideas that you may have never previously considered. And while it may not be the end all be all of all pawn structure guides, it's definitely the right platform to get started with.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's an amazing book, and I agree with you. Everyone recommends it for a reason. I wasn't aware of the Soltis book somehow though. So how is it structured? Is it like specific position? So it's called 100 Chess Master Trade Secrets. How is it specific positions? Is it like in this opening you should do this, or is it more sort of general advice?
It's pretty general, and the thing I like about it is it's literally formatted like number 1, Bird's Bind, and it shows you like these different pawn structure configurations that can result in the knight getting from f3 to e5 or from c3 to d5, and how does that create pressure, and how does that coordinate with a fianchettoed bishop. And we give like 2 or 3 case examples from completely different openings, so you know that you're not reading through somebody else's opening prep, you're reading through actual concrete positional ideas. And then we'll move on to the next idea, and I'll give you various examples to break down from that. I think it's a really good book if you've just broken 2000 and you don't really know how to improve. Even though I probably already knew like 50% of what the book covered, I found the other 50% of the book pretty instructive, and that in conjunction with the work I was doing in the Endgame was particularly valuable for me.
Okay. And you mentioned that you're going to be emphasizing tactics a bit. How do you go about that?
So one thing that I'm already fascinated by is Chess.com actually just released a new version of Puzzle Rush called Survival Mode, where it's not about trying to crank out as many in 5 minutes as possible. It's about basically doing in as many tactics as you can with no time limit and same 3 strikes you're out system. And so it really gives you that opportunity to go to a next level with some of the harder puzzles in like that 30 to 45 range and beyond. And so that's actually already been really helpful for me. I've already started to see some results in my games that have been quite encouraging. And then on top of that, it's going over like the top Grandmaster games that are interesting to me based on the pawn structure or the dynamic idea. Obviously, at the top level, there's a lot of draws, and some of those are, let's just say, easier to get to than others. So I focus on the ones that are a little bit more challenging, but that's kind of been like my starting spot, and I go from there. And then on a weekly basis, I work with Eugene Perelyshteyn. He gives me a lot more complicated positions to kind of build off what I do during the week.
Cool. I'm excited to check out that product, but now you've got me brainstorming names for it. I feel like survival mode is good, but there's other possibilities. You could call it like Old Man Puzzle Rush, or like, or like instead of Puzzle Rush, call it Puzzle Saunter.
Puzzle Saunter is good.
Puzzle Stroll. Something to underscore the fact that it gives hope to those of us whose brains don't fire quite as quickly as, say, like Hans Niemann or whoever, that Dutch kid. Who's that? I can't think of his name.
Casper Schoppen, I believe. Right?
Casper Schoppen, thank you. The kid who's getting over 100 in Puzzle Rush. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So, yeah, I need a new format.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's definitely been really helpful, and I think the coaches of any chess player who actively plays online, they'll be the first to tell you that Puzzle Rush is great, but if you want to actually get better at Puzzle Rush, the way that you do that is you actually focus on solving tactics, not at trying to move your mouse faster. Yeah. And so this is that really good compromise of you can actually get better at your game while you can also try to boost your Puzzle Rush score, which I know that a lot of people do want to do.
Yeah, and it probably I mean, I know that at the top level, the people we mentioned are actually memorizing some of the puzzles in order to make their scores just the sickest. Although, right. I mean, that can't be too bad for your chess either. So, but it's interesting. All right, Isaac, we have another question for you from a Patreon supporter. This one is from Jason Woolham, who says he met you at the Chicago Open a few years ago. He thinks in 2017, and you had a chance to discuss something that stuck with him. You went over. Sorry, a lot of pronouns here. He says he went over a game he played, which means you, and said the game told a story. Is there a method that can be used to try and remember moves or understand a position where it does tell that story?
So one of the things that I focus on working with my students when I have had time to coach is this idea of storyboarding your games. If you were to write like a comic strip or a story, you wouldn't just start from your introduction and go, right? You would actually develop your plot, you would develop the different points at which like the actions would occur to kind of bring the plot along. But the greater point is when you kind of zoom out, everything works together. So that way you have a central point. For a lot of under 2000 chess players, one of the things I noticed they mess up on is that they'll get to a position where they have 5 or 6 ideas and maybe they'll choose the right plan. But then 3 moves later, they're focused on an entirely different plan that had nothing to do with what they wanted to do 3 moves ago. And so when I tell my students to storyboard their games, what I'm really telling them is find your opponent's weaknesses and focus on them. If the position stays static and nothing really changes structurally, or the pieces, their values don't really change within relation to each other, that's probably a sign that you want to continue focusing on your plan if it's, putting pressure on your opponent. Then know when to switch when those static changes occur and the pawn structures change or maybe pieces get traded. And that will ultimately make you a stronger player. Knowing when to focus on the right plan and then knowing when to switch, those 2 elements of kind of calculation and chess psychology, I feel like that lays the foundation for anybody under 2000 to move forward and go beyond that.
Wow, that's really good advice. I think that rings true with me. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the stories of your games typically?
Well, I mean, probably when I was in my junior, senior years, it was something like, develop your pieces, put pressure on your opponent, control the center, oops, blunder, and then lose the game, right? But more seriously, I mean, you try to find the weak squares, and you should already have an idea of what those are based on your opening prep, or maybe your opponent played something that was just wrong, and you're finding the refutation or the the positional kind of counter blow to make it kind of refute that move, and then sticking to that plan, right? So everything should work together. You should always be asking yourself, like, where do your pieces want to go? As Augard says, what's your worst place piece, and how do you make that work together? Obviously, the one drawback is if you would calculate entirely like that, you'll miss every single tactic known to man. And so knowing that, and then also knowing the critical moments to calculate all the forcing lines that you and your opponent have, that's kind of like where that balance lies. But I noticed that when I was going over a lot of my games for Chess Summit, that my opponents maybe aren't the best defenders because we're not grandmasters, and so because of that, it makes it easier for you to find the different resources if you just stick to your plan and know what you want to do.
Okay. Excellent advice. And you mentioned you're going to be playing in the DC Chess League. What else do you have? Do you have a tournament before then, now that you're getting settled in?
So there's a lot of events at the Arlington Chess Club, which I'm currently considering playing in because it's literally right down the street from me. It's like 15, 20-minute walk, and I can play any given Friday that I'd like. But ideally, I'm preparing for bigger and stronger events like the Washington Chess Congress in October and all of the great Maryland Chess Association events that happen in the spring. And so, right now, I think it's important for me to just focus on getting in the habit of playing tournament chess again, and then as I kind of build up that confidence, go start playing in these open events where I'm really playing against the strongest players, regionally or even in the country.
Nice. And are you going to pull the trigger and get a car?
I feel like that's going to be inevitable, although I'll say that, with the Metro, that's a huge added bonus I just never had in Pittsburgh. So I can actually, if I wanted to, go take the Metro and go to a Maryland Chess Association event because it's in Rockville and it's like a 30-minute Metro ride, and I don't have to worry about parking, which is something I didn't think about, before I moved over to DC. But the inevitable answer is yes, I'll probably have to get a car and actually learn how to drive.
Oh, you don't even know how to drive. Okay.
I do have my license, but I somehow managed to skip the learning how to drive part.
Okay. Well, at least you have the license. Be careful out there.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's good to hear. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with your chess. I mean, I hope you continue to find time to play. You're kind of in the prime years of really being able to push the pedal to the metal. And I would think that working for chess.com, like even if the majority of your work is going to be like data driven and sort of, as you say, I mean, whether it's macro or micro, it's going to be focusing on the business, but still, I think being that steeped in chess can't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, one thing that I think is going to become an asset of working for chess.com. As long as my passion is still there, I'm going to always try to play and, move up the ladder.
Okay. Well, Isaac, have we hit everything, all of the major topics? I think we have. Yeah,
I believe we've gone through everything that we were thinking about talking about.
Okay, I mean, I'm excited for a lot of these things to sort of unfold from the chess.com angle for the Fischer Random World Championship and the Pro Chess League, and just as a general chess fan, of course, the World Cup. So yeah, things should be interesting, and excited to see what you guys cook up when the next season comes around for the Pro Chess League.
I'm really excited as well, as both someone who's worked behind the scenes, but also someone who'll be, watching the actual product in 2020. So I'm right there with you.
Excellent. And I know you're active on Twitter, so I will link to that. Or is there any other, for people to reach you, how else can they reach you or keep up with what you're doing?
So Twitter is the best way to keep in touch with me. I have a chess.com account now specifically for my day-to-day work, which is just my full name. So if you were to look me up and follow me on chess.com, you'll get all the updates when I post various news articles for the events that I'm working on. So that'll probably be the second best way to keep in touch.
Excellent. All right. Well, Isaac, congratulations on the new exciting gig. And yeah, we look forward to seeing both what you and chess.com bring to the chess masses in the coming months and years.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible. Most of all to my producer, Matthew Passy, but also to everyone who helps spread the word about the show. That can be by telling a friend, by writing a positive statement on Twitter or Facebook or whatever your preferred social media outlet is, by writing a glowing review on Apple Podcasts or another podcast platform. All of that stuff helps. But most of all, I want to thank the people who provide financial support to the show. Without you all, the show would not be possible. So here we go. Thanks to my Patreon and PayPal perpetual partners. I would like to give extra special thanks to the following people and entities: Chessable.com, Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, the Apprend Chess Twitch channel, Andrew Bach, Austin Clough, Benjamin Handelman, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, Dan O'Hanlon, Danny Davidson, David Schreiber, I am Dimitri Schneider, Greg Natel, I am Greg Shahade, Guven Monet, Jen Scream, John Jernigan, John Cromarty, Kelly Palmer, Lone Pine Chess, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Michael Kahn, the mysterious Moonmaster 9000, Seattle Chess Club, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryant, Todd Kennedy, and I'd like to give thanks to Aaron Waffler, Ace Vallega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, FM Andre Terakov, Bill Moran, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brett Howardland, Brett Zeldo, Brian Mullis, Chad Hilton, Chris Balcom, Chris Flanagan, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Baumgartner, Christopher Chabris, Christopher Wood. I am Christoph Zalecki, aka Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, David Kofer, Daniel Gell, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Lucas of the U.S. Chess Federation, Daniel Naylor, Dave Saylor, David Cramley of Chessable.com, Dwayne Edmonds, Ethan Smith, Evan Sagers, I am Alec Donnie Ariel, Fox Valley Chess Club, Frank Tortoris MD, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vandervelt, Gerard Barta, Giovanni Russo, Han Shu, Harish Srinivasan, James Bonastia, Jason Woolham, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Martello, JJ Stranad, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, Justin Gardner, Jen Shahade, Jerry Wells, John Thompson, GM Josh Friedel, newly minted IM Kare Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, IM Kostya Kovyutsky, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Larry Reiforth, Laura Belyavsky, Lucio Casada Silva, Matthew Knudsen, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco of SeattleChessMeetup.org, Miguel Araspidi, Mr. Michael Shahade, Nate Salon, Neil Bruce, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Passy Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Swaney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Rory Yearwood, Ryan Berg, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, Steiner Lima, WGM Tatyev Abrahamian, Thomas Stanix, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tomas Kolmanich, Tony Rotella, Tyron Price, Victor Vrancoulge, William Brock, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng of Chess1000.com, and Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks a lot, everyone. I will catch you guys soon.